Ian, we have a Patreon.
We do. Patreon.com/CU podcast. You go, you pay a little bit of money, you get the full video podcast. You get the full video podcast. You get the access. You can get access to the bonus bits. Listen to my story this morning about constipated Spike. You get. We do hangouts. We do monthly hangouts. Writing. And
we have a pin club now?
Pin club. All sorts of good stuff.
My duck.
All sorts of good stuff.
Okay. This was not close, but it was an unfair one. This is actually, and the one that's been losing every week is actually one of the better ones we've had in a while. It's just been going up against some better ones that keep beating it. In second place, this is a shellacking. This is a fair and democratic, like, Putin election here. Results is grading or reselling worse for video game collecting. 12%. I can't remember the last time one was that low. 12%. And in first place, 88%. Games or consoles that Luna customers regretted buying. Ian, this isn't a Tales from the Game Store. No, I wish it was, since people love those. But it's a trip down memory lane, maybe thinking back to customers either being excited for a game, not realizing what a game was, maybe recommend a game that didn't understand it and still bought it, things like that.
So I tried to be pretty, I honestly tried not to recommend stuff that I really didn't think people would like. So if there was a weird game that I liked or I thought was good or had some merits, but I didn't think it was a home run, I would oftentimes shy away from recommending it unless someone asked for something weird or, kind of off the beaten path. What usually ended up happening was that a lot of people would not listen to my recommendations when they asked, and that's when they would. They would
go against Ian's recommendation.
That's where they would end up, coming back and returning stuff. Main thing is, to state this up front. One of the main rules of business is if someone picks something up, brings it up to the counter, wants to buy it, doesn't ask any questions, you sell it to them. One, it's a good business practice because you got to make that money. We have an exchange policy. If they really hate it, they can come back and exchange it. It's fine. The other thing is customers don't like to be told they're wrong.
People in general like to be
told they're wrong.
But yeah.
If I went to a record store and I brought a record up there that I wanted to buy and the guy was like, "Oh, this is garbage." Be like, well, just fucking let me buy it, man. Like, it's not.
Why do you have it in the store if it's garbage? You don't want someone to buy it?
It's not your problem. And I have seen video game stores and people do that where they kind of like utilize their opinion as the be all end all, and they'll like judge stuff at the counter. You don't want to do that. You don't ever want to judge something at the counter. You just fucking sell it. But the area where I always got the most exchanges was people trying to buy games for their kids on any system that was not a Nintendo system.
Uh-oh.
So, we've talked about it a little bit before when we were growing up, kind of the first generation of folks to grow up with video games as part of our everyday lives. They were definitely skewed a little bit more towards kids. We brought that up when we were talking about NES games last week, about how it was weird to see something like a Predator or a Terminator or a Hudson Hawk on a system back then, because
R-rated
that just
movies.
Yeah, that wasn't the market at the time. So, we grow up, and as we got older, the real target demographic for games ended up being like that 18 to 35 demographic. And I'd say that's probably even expanded a little bit more now to maybe something like 20 to 45. So, a couple of things. When parents would come in and they'd ask, like, what's a good system for my kid? I'd always try to steer them towards, for young kids especially, I'd try to steer them towards a Nintendo system, whether it was a Wii or a Switch or a Super Nintendo or whatever it was that the kids wanted, something they can play with their friends. I'd actually recommend Nintendo 64s for that sort of thing. But I've had parents more than once who would buy like PlayStation 2s or Xbox 360s for, like their 6-year-old or their 7-year-old. And they would fairly regularly get returned in exchange for something else because they couldn't find games for their kids on them.
Okay.
Now, some parents don't necessarily care so much about the violence or whatever, the gore in games. So, you've got kids playing teen games or mature games or whatever, young children. But you have a lot of parents who will come in. They'll ask me what they should get. I explain to them the situation. They would buy a 360. They would come in the next week to buy some games for their kids, and they'd be like, I need games that are rated E for everyone. I'm sorry, I explained to you that's not really something you get on 360, PS3. I think that's really kind of the era where that started to happen, where you got less and less of these kid-oriented games. And then you did get some of the like the Transformers movie games or the Iron Man game, and those would be some of the only options you had. And parents would gravitate them, and when they would ask, "What do you think about it?" I'd be like, "They're not very good." They take them home, they bring them back the next day. Why? Because they suck, and the kids get frustrated. They always wanted to go for the cheapest games, and I'd be like, try these Lego titles. These are actually pretty fun. My kid likes Captain America. Okay, all right, fine, but I'm going to see this game come back the next day.
You don't say that though.
No, I don't say that to them, but I'm just saying I know I'm going to see that come back the next day. So that's really a lot of it is parents trying to find games on systems, and I think it's parents that don't play as many games. They grew up with them, of course, but they don't play many. They remember video games, they remember having fun, but they haven't really paid attention to the fact that video games have aged up with us. Sure. And in a way, it's kind of left kids in the dust. The other thing that happens is that with like NES games and Super Nintendo games in particular, Genesis games, retro stuff, people will buy based on what they remember from childhood and then realize that it was a game they played because they had it, but it's not very good. So
do they usually remember that, or you have to remind?
No, they remember it later and bring it back and exchange it.
So if someone brings up an NES game, God, what's one that's like a borderline one that we just played because we liked it?
Rampage is one that would get exchanged back a lot. Because we all remember Rampage from being kids, and we all remember, hey, beating up buildings as large monsters is fun. But I would get that game back all the time because people would be like, I'm bored of it within half an hour.
Or maybe you had Spy versus Spy as a kid, but then you get them like, this is not a fun game, for them anymore.
Right.
And that's all you had when you were a kid, so you had to play it.
And that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Other big ones would be like some of the LJN games. People would pick those up and then realize, maybe this isn't so good. A big one on the Super Nintendo. A big one on the Super Nintendo. X-Men Arcade's Revenge.
I had that as a kid. And you got to get used to that one. There's a learning curve to that game. 2.5 stars average game, according to a certain Science Guidebook. But boy, the expectations were sky high when that came out.
Yep. That one would get...
I can see that.
That one would get brought back quite a bit.
From people that were first buying for the first time, or people that already owned it before?
People who owned it before.
Yeah, you had to learn to love that game.
Yep.
Very challenging, very frustrating game.
And I found that to be the case with, a lot of those superhero games. Even the considerably, they looked nice. The X-Men Mutant Apocalypse and the Avengers War of the Gems.
I haven't played that one.
They're very similar games. They look nice. They were kind of the start.
Marvel's War of the Gems.
Marvel's War of the Gems, yeah. They look they're nice because the graphics and the animation, that's where they kind of start to get that Capcom Marvel verse.
Yeah,
animation.
The mid-90s look.
Yeah, they're nice sprites,
yeah.
But the games are boring. And so a lot of the times when people bring games back, it really is just it's misremembered. It's misremembered youth. This is stuff that we had and we played, and now we don't really like it. Oh, big one. Mortal Kombat 1 on the Super Nintendo.
People have fond memories of that one?
It's not so much fond memories. They buy it thinking they know what they're getting, and then they remember there's no blood.
They didn't know that?
And the game sucks, and they bring it back.
That's something you never forgot. Like that's something we never will forget that.
Well, I mean, certain people like us are never going to forget that, but someone who, doesn't really pay attention to these old games, it happened a lot where people would buy it and they would bring it back and they're like, this isn't the one I was thinking of. I'm like, you're probably thinking of Mortal Kombat 2.
Which is an excellent port.
Both Super Nintendo and Genesis got pretty good ports of 2. And I'm like, 2 is what you're thinking of. Absolutely what you're thinking of. So yeah, Mortal Kombat would be like, that's a missed, a missed memory. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of it. In terms of consoles that people bought and would bring back, NESs. Because, and I feel like we talked about this a little bit recently too in some topic, but no one wants to care for an NES. No one wants to clean their games. Everyone buys the NES so much during the holiday season. People would buy NESs and bring them back because they don't want to do the bare minimum maintenance. They've all been spoiled by modern systems where you hit power and it goes on, or it doesn't, and it means it's broken. Mm-hmm. So they all think when you turn an NES on for the first time and you're putting a dirty cart in there and it's flashing the title screen, it's broken. And it sucks because what's your alternative? I'm not.
I almost feel like you should have had like a printout to give to each NES sold. Like this is the care and maintenance sheet.
I really should have.
I mean, honestly, that would have probably saved you.
Because I mean, I gave everyone the spiel. The problem is no one ever listened to it.
I know.
I could sit there and show everyone how to clean their games. They'd take everything home, then they'd bring it back and it's broken. And I'd be like, and they're like, here are the games that I had that I played. I'm like, did you clean them?
I would have had a tip sheet.
Yeah,
like here's your NES tip sheet. Rubbing alcohol, Q-tips. This is what you do if it's blinking. This is what you do if it's a solid color.
Bippio Q-tippy says fucking clean your games.
Bippio, what is
Bippio Q-tippy.
Mr. Menda says this.
Yeah.
Put some arms and legs in the Menda bottle.
Bippio Q-tippy. Anyway. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. NESs would always come back. And then that was the pipeline. That was the pipeline to Retron. Hyperkin, and I know people don't love them, but for some people that's exactly what they need.
Yeah, and it's HD TV compatible out of the box.
The newer ones are. Yeah. So yeah, there it is.
So that was the console regret. The big one's the NES.
The big one was the NES. It was people who were buying 3DOs and fucking Jaguars, they knew what they were getting.
They knew it was weird.
They knew it was weird. They knew what they were getting. But no, it was
Atari regret. Atari regret.
Oh yeah.
I was gonna say
absolutely Atari.
Some 45-year-old that's like, oh, I played this when I was 6 years old, and it's just like, oh, this is not what I wanted. Like, or I got my nostalgia out of the way in 20 minutes.
Well, and there was definitely Atari regrets. And one of the main reasons there was Atari regrets is it's a nightmare and it's ugly to hook it up to a modern TV. I know a lot of people who bought it, and I'm like, this is going to be gross.
Well, plus the games when you're 4 are okay, but when you're like 45, it's like, oh wow, yeah, Pitfall's fun for 15 minutes, but I don't want to play it now for like a month.
There's like 10 Atari games that I can play pretty regularly. Pitfall, Yars.
All right, you know what I'm saying though.
Yeah,
most of the games
most of the games are going to be 5 minutes things, and that's it.
They're like, yeah, it's one step up from having a handheld game, an LED game in your hand. It's basically the same generation of stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, I can picture the Atari regret. But funny enough, the Atari is easier to maintain than NES in the games.
What's that?
The Atari is easier to manage than an NES.
It is. If for whatever reason, those cartridges can get really dirty and still fire up.
Yeah, but it has the protector on them too, so it's not exposed.
On some of them, that protector was really actually a very cool idea.
Yeah, just interesting to think about. Like, the games were actually. It's almost 50 years old, 45 years old, the console, but they're still kicking there. Well, thanks for that.
Yeah, it was fun.
No Game Boy regrets. No, I bought a Game Boy, didn't like the green and black colors.
No, because we generally did not sell. That was one of our little secret things. We generally
no OG Game Boys?
Did not sell OG Game Boys because of a lot of defects. The lines, that you get from loose solder joints, the screens, and honestly, because a lot of people would buy them and return them. So we always had a few on hand, and if someone really wanted them, we could figure out how to get someone one.
What did you do with the trade-ins then for all the Game Boys when they came in?
We didn't. We generally did not take them.
Really?
Yeah, we generally
just did not for the free bin.
I mean, if there was free ones, sure, but yeah, in general, we did not.
Okay. Okay, well, thanks for that non-tale from the game store.
You're welcome.
You say you're welcome?
You're welcome.
May the Schwartz be with you. You're welcome.